A man shows up in 1851 claiming to be from a country that doesn't exist. Decades later, people start slipping through time on a random street in Liverpool. And then two couples spend the night in a Paris hotel that vanishes from reality. These are true parallel universe stories that defy reality. In 1851, a man calling himself Yoparvan was picked up by local authorities in the town of Frankfurt Oder, in what was then Prussia. He didn't speak German fluently, but he understood it well enough to communicate, and what he told them left everyone confused. He claimed to be from a country called Luxaria, which he said was in a region called Sacria, supposedly somewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. Never heard of it? Well, yeah, nobody else did either. It wasn't on any map, it wasn't part of any empire, and it never has been. It didn't exist. But Yopar was dead serious. He said he was searching for his long-lost brother, and when asked to show his documents, he produced papers written in a completely unknown language. He also claimed to be fluent in multiple languages, some of which had no record of ever existing either, like Luxarian and Abramian. Eventually, authorities labeled him a lunatic and sent him off for further investigation, and that's the last the world ever heard of him. There was never any follow-up. If this guy ever really did exist, he probably ended up in an asylum, and if you know anything about mental institutions at the time, you know they were basically hell on earth. Makes sense he was never heard from again. Was this guy mentally unstable though, or is there really a chance that he somehow slipped from an alternate reality, a different version of Earth where Luxaria was as real as Germany? And in this alternate Earth, is there a more handsome version of me doing a video just like this, but talking about how Yoparvan mysteriously vanished into thin air and was never seen again? In the heart of Liverpool, there's a street called Bold Street. Nothing crazy at first glance, just shops, cafes, people going about their day, but ask around and you'll likely hear whispers about something very strange. People slipping through time. One of the most famous stories comes from 1996. A guy named Frank was walking with his wife near Bold Street. She popped into a bookstore and he strolled ahead to a music shop. As he crossed the street, everything suddenly changed. The modern cars vanished, the noises around him dulled, and when he looked around, he was standing in what looked like 1950s Liverpool. People were dressed in post-war clothes, and there were old-school shop fronts where modern businesses should have been. He even saw a store called Crips, which hadn't existed in decades. A few moments later, the world flickered again, and he was back in the present like nothing had happened. Frank swore that this happened though, and he's not the only one. There are dozens of reports from people who say they've walked Bold Street and wound up in the past. Some just for a few seconds, others for minutes. Is it just a coincidence, hallucinations, or is Bold Street sitting on some kind of weird wrinkle in time, a natural glitch in the matrix, if you will? In 1979, two British couples, Geoff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby, were driving through France on their way to a holiday in Spain. While passing through Paris, they decided to stop for the night. They pulled off the main road and found this charming, old-fashioned hotel. Nothing fancy, but it was cozy and heavy wooden furniture. No modern conveniences though, like none. The beds didn't have pillows even, it was just bolsters. The windows had these old wooden shutters, odd but charming in a vintage kind of way. They even had dinner at the attached restaurant, where they were served a very basic, kind of old school meal by staff in these outdated uniforms. The whole night also only cost them about 19 francs total. That's about $21.50 US. Even in the 70s, that was suspiciously cheap. They tried to find the hotel again on their way back through Paris, but it was gone completely. They retraced their route. They asked locals. Nobody had ever heard of this place though. The road they remembered taking didn't seem to exist anymore. They later checked their photos from the trip, but the ones they took of the hotel were gone. They just weren't there. But both couples swore up and down that this was real. So did they spend the night in a building that slipped forward through time, or did they slip backward into some echo of a Paris that no longer was there? In 2009, a guy named James Richards claimed he had a very weird experience in California. According to him, he was out driving near Del Porto Canyon with his dog when it took off chasing a rabbit. He ran after it, tripped, hit his head, and blacked out. When he came to, He was in what looked like a regular room with furniture, but there were also machines he didn't recognize. A man introduced himself as Jonas and said that while on a work-related trip from a dimensional travel agency, he had used the machine to transport the unconscious Richards to this parallel Earth in order to help him. This alternate version of Earth was very similar to ours, but with some key differences. One being that in Jonas's world, the Beatles were all still alive and making music. Naturally, James didn't believe it until Jonas gave him a cassette tape. The label said Everyday Chemistry was a compilation of Beatles songs that didn't exist here. James brought the tape back with him when he returned to our world, and he posted the whole thing on a website he made. The music's on there. It does kind of sound like the Beatles' version of like Pink Floyd's Division Bell, you know, like just music they would have done in their later years. Is this just a really creative art project or a hoax though? Or is there a chance there's really a whole Beatles album online from a parallel universe? Back in the 12th century, the quiet village of Woolpit in England got a visit from two very strange kids. A brother and sister showed up out of nowhere, looking completely lost. They were also bright green, not a sickly green, I mean, a kind of like Shrek hue. The locals were kind of freaked out, but they took them in. The kids didn't speak any recognizable language. They were terrified of sunlight, and they refused to eat anything except raw beans for days. Now, eventually they adjusted a bit. The boy unfortunately got sick and died not long after, but the girl survived and slowly learned to speak English. And that's when she started telling people some pretty strange things. She said they came from a place called St. Martin's Land, where everything had a greenish twilight and the sun never fully shone. According to her, the two of them had been tending to their father's flock when they heard this loud noise and suddenly found themselves in Woolpit. Were these mysterious green children from some different culture and just got lost, or had they somehow wandered out of a parallel world? In 1957, something terrible happened in the quiet town of Hexham, England. Two sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, were hit by a car and killed while walking to church. Their parents, understandably, were devastated, but about a year later, the mother got pregnant again, and in 1958, she gave birth to twins again. Jillian and Jennifer, they named them. Now, from the start, there were some odd things. Jennifer had birthmarks in the exact same place as Jacqueline had them. And as they got older, the twins started asking for toys that had belonged to their dead sisters, toys they'd never seen before. They even knew their names. They also seemed to have memories of places they'd never been, like a school the older girls had attended. One time the twins pointed out a park they claimed to recognize, saying, "That's where we used to play." By the time they turned 5, though, the memories began to fade. The girls grew up like normal kids, eventually forgetting all the strange things they used to say, but their father became convinced that Joanna and Jacqueline had been reincarnated into their twin sisters. Was it a case of parental grief mixing with coincidence, or did something actually transfer over? Like two souls refusing to move on, jumping right back into the same family. A lot of people who've heard this story kinda think so. And that's why the story of the Pollock twins became one of the most famous reincarnation cases ever recorded. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving home late at night in Minnesota when his car went into a ditch near the town of Lind. He wasn't hurt, he was just stuck, so he called his parents around 1:30 a.m. and asked them to come get him. He said he was near Lind. When they drove out there, they couldn't find him. He stayed on the phone with them for nearly 47 minutes, calmly describing where he was walking. Then suddenly, in the middle of the call, Brandon said, "Oh, and the line went dead. That was the last time anyone heard from him. His car was eventually found, but they never found a body, and to this day, Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains completely unsolved. In 1901, two English school teachers, Anne Moberly and Charlotte Jourdain, took a trip to Paris. While visiting the Palace of Versailles, they decided to explore the gardens near the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's old stomping grounds. But as they wandered, something felt kinda off. The air got heavy, the atmosphere changed. The people they passed were suddenly wearing 18th century clothing. One man in a wide brim hat looked downright ghostly even. They claimed the place felt lifeless and surreal, like walking into a painting. But then, out of nowhere, everything snapped back to normal. Later, they became convinced that they had time-slipped straight into pre-revolution France, possibly 1792. They even claimed to have seen Marie Antoinette herself sketching by the grass. They wrote a book about it under fake names, and the story became relatively famous. Some believed it, some said they were just delusional or making it up entirely, but both women stuck to their story for the rest of their lives. Were they hallucinating, or did they somehow catch a rip in time and stumble into the past? There's a patch over the South Atlantic Ocean called the South Atlantic Anomaly, and it's kinda like the Bermuda Triangle, but for space. So satellites that pass over it glitch out. Laptops on the International Space Station will sometimes crash. Astronauts report seeing flashes of light even when their eyes are closed. Why? Because in this spot, Earth's magnetic field is weirdly weak, like dangerously weak, which allows more cosmic radiation to pour in. NASA even has to shut off instruments when passing over it because they can't guarantee accurate readings. Some satellites have flat out died after taking too many passes, and here's the freakiest part: the anomaly seems to be growing and splitting. And conspiracy theorists, they got plenty of theories. Ancient alien tech buried under the ocean, a secret underground base, a rift to another dimension, possibly. This has become a rather infamous story on Reddit. Always reminds me of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Inner Light. So this guy takes a hit to the head and blacks out. But instead of being out for a few seconds, the guy ends up living what feels like 10 full years in a completely different life. Entirely in his head, of course. In this other version of reality, he meets a woman, falls in love, settles down, starts a family. They go grocery shopping, they argue about bills, they play with their kids in the yard. He remembers what the weather was like. He remembers birthdays. I mean, we're talking real grounded stuff here. This doesn't sound like the type of wacky nonsense that goes on in dreams. Felt like real life. 10 years of it, mind you. But one day in that world, he starts noticing something strange. There's this lamp in the living room, totally normal looking, but it doesn't fit. It starts bugging him. It's like a little glitch. And the more he stares at it, the more everything else starts to feel wrong. And that's when it all starts unraveling. Suddenly he wakes up. He's lying on the ground, surrounded by people. He's back where he was right before he blacked out. Only minutes have passed. But the man is absolutely devastated. The life he just came back to doesn't feel right anymore. He remembers his wife and kids from the other world. He misses them. They weren't real though, but the emotions were. For a long time after, he struggled. He said it felt like he was mourning people who never existed. Now, was this a case of the brain doing weird things under stress? Or did he tap into something else, a different version of his life that's playing out somewhere, a parallel universe? Ken Korczak, a writer and journalist, had one of the most bizarre experiences, writing an article claiming that he'd slipped into a parallel universe. It wasn't like a whole new world, just a slightly different version of his own home and garden. He said the differences were subtle at first. His pets, specifically his cats and chickens, were behaving completely differently than he was used to. It's like they were the same animals, but something was just off about them, like seeing them through a different lens. In his words, it felt like everything in his yard was a few degrees askew. But the weirdest part came when he met this strange female entity. She wasn't human, at least not in the way you'd think. Korczak described her as resembling an elf or a fairy, and she seemed completely at home in this alternate reality. He also described feeling like she was there for a reason, like she was some kind of guide in this parallel world. He spent a lot of time reflecting on it, especially the strange, almost magical feeling of meeting this being. He genuinely believes that he had a real encounter with a parallel version of his home. As someone who's always been interested in the concept of alternate realities too, he dove deep trying to make sense of it. Was this just a hallucination, or did he actually slip into another dimension for a brief moment? In December of 2024, Google made a pretty big announcement about their new quantum chip, Willow. This chip solved a problem in 5 minutes that would have taken even the fastest supercomputers 47 years. What was amazing here though wasn't just how fast the chip was, it's also what the head of Google's quantum AI team, Hartmut Nevins, said about it. He mentioned that this speed might be a sign that their quantum computers are pulling from multiple realities at once. Not just a throwaway comment, he was serious about this. Now, this ties in with something called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which states that every decision or event causes the universe to split into different versions, creating a parallel reality for each possibility. So when a quantum computer like Willow does a calculation, it's possible that it's tapping into these other universes, running all the possibilities at once, without us even realizing it. And it's not just Google talking along these lines. Other tech companies like IBM and D-Wave have been exploring quantum computing for years, and some think this technology could eventually lead us to understand or even interact with alternate realities. It's not quite science fiction anymore. Quantum computing might be the closest thing we've got to real-world proof that the multiverse could exist. So it's a sweltering day in July of 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. A man arrives on an international flight and walks up to customs. Everything seems routine. He looks European, speaks multiple languages, and has a legit-looking passport, from a distance that is. Looking at it up close, turns out this passport says he's from a country called Torid. Never heard of it? Neither had the Japanese officials. They ask him to point it out on a map, and without hesitation he points to the area around where Andorra is, between France and Spain, but he's confused. He insists Torid has been a country for over 1,000 years. The customs officers are confused, to say the least. Is this a joke? Is the guy just out of his mind? The guy seems just as confused as they are. His passport has stamps from other countries, including past visits to Japan, and he has multiple currencies in his wallet. He even mentions a business trip and says he's got meetings set up with a company in Tokyo, but when the officials call the company, they say they've never heard of him. Same story with the hotel that he claimed to have booked. At this point, they're really not sure what to do with him, so they put him up in a hotel room under guard for the night while they try to figure things out. But by the next morning, he's gone. The room was locked from the outside. There was no way out, at least none that the guards wouldn't have been able to see. To this day, no one knows who he was or where he came from, really. Some think he slipped into our world from another reality and then slipped right back out. Others think this whole story is just a good old-fashioned urban legend, but if we seriously consider the possibility that the multiverse really is a thing, well then this story starts to sound a little less outlandish. The Maravasi Stone Forest in Peru is one of those places that seems to have a ton of weird stuff happening. People have been talking about strange occurrences there for years, mostly because the place is filled with these huge stone structures that look like they belong to some ancient civilization. But there are also some strange stories surrounding this place. Well, one goes that a group of hikers got a lot more than they bargained for when they camped here. While hanging out, they started to hear some music coming from what seemed like a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It sounded like a celebration. The group looked around and sure enough, they spotted a stone cabin lit up from the inside, and they could see people dancing through the windows. The people were dressed like they were from the 1600s, all in old-fashioned clothes. Naturally, one of the hikers decided to check things out. She got closer to the cabin, and the closer she got, the stranger things became. Her friend noticed that she was acting off, like her body was stiff and she wasn't walking right. Got even weirder when she suddenly couldn't move her arm, like she was partially paralyzed. They managed to pull her away from the cabin, and she snapped out of it right away. People who know the area say the Maravasi might be some kind of doorway between dimensions or timelines. The idea is that certain spots on Earth might have thin barriers to other worlds, and that cabin could have been a glimpse into some different time. This story comes from a Reddit user named Albert Norman 2069, who shared an experience that left him questioning everything about the world. It had all started on June 28, 2014, a day that seemed normal at first. He'd woken up, brushed his teeth, ate breakfast, and headed out to work. But as he turned on the car radio, something wasn't right. Instead of the usual music, the station was airing a talk show. The host was excitedly talking about something called victory in the Great War, and praising the troops for their role in this victory. At first, the Redditor thought maybe it was some kind of special segment, but the more the host went on, the stranger things got. There was talk of a victory in Italy, and something about the Second Great Depression finally coming to an end. He was confused, but he ended up brushing things off. It was probably just fictional. But then things started getting even stranger when he was at work. During lunch, He overheard his coworkers talking about the same victory in Italy, and they kept mentioning the numbers 33 to 13. When he asked what they were talking about, they acted like he was the odd one for not knowing. And when he asked about a coworker named Sam, who didn't seem to be there, no one seemed to remember it. At least something was very off. On his way home, he decided to take a different route to avoid traffic, and that's when he noticed that the city looked worse than he remembered. Buildings were crumbling, some were abandoned, and there were banners everywhere again celebrating this mysterious victory. When he finally got home, he flicked on the news. The anchors were talking about the victory in Italy and how the US was dealing with a war abroad. Europe was also in chaos, and the US was in an even worse depression than the 1930s. Of course, things went back to normal by the next day. So was it just a really vivid dream? Well, possibly. But perhaps Albert Norman 2069 really did spend a day in a much darker version of our own reality. Next up are some pretty strange cave paintings, the Wanjinas, some of the most mysterious and downright eerie cave art on Earth. These ancient paintings are found in the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, painted by Aboriginal tribes whose culture has been going strong for over 60,000 years. The Wanjinas, according to legend, were sky beings, spirits from the clouds who came down during dream time, said to be this time when the Earth was still being formed. These beings supposedly created the land, animals, people, everything. They taught the Aboriginals how to live, and then they vanished. Some say they returned to the stars, others say they went underground. But, I mean, just look at these cave paintings, the big black eyes, the pale skin, they look like aliens. But this art is estimated to be tens of thousands of years old, long before anyone was talking about aliens, at least not in the modern sense. Kinda makes you wonder, are the Wanjinas more than just myth? Did these ancient tribes actually encounter something from beyond the stars, or maybe even from a parallel reality? This final story comes from Reddit user GoodResolve33 and goes as follows. When I was younger, my cousins and I would play in my aunt's basement during major holiday parties. Parents would be upstairs and we would all just hang out and mess around in the basement, entertaining ourselves with whatever junk was down there. Well, there was a metal door down there with a bolt lock that we never touched. But one day, we unlocked the door and we saw a major boxing event going on. I'm talking Jumbotron, bright lights, arena, and a major crowd. Everything seemed to freeze when we opened the door though. People in the crowd turned around to look at us. Fighters stopped fighting, the referee signaled us out, and we saw shadows in the crowd running toward us. It all sounds crazy, but I remember how scared we were. We shut the door, ran upstairs, and sat in the living room with our parents. I remember them being like, "What's going on with these guys?" As we sat in the living room silent, crapping ourselves because we thought we were going to get in trouble. Fast forward to much later, I tried to tell my parents and they swear that I imagined it. I thought I did too for the longest time until randomly one of my cousins from that day hit me up after so long of not communicating, only to bring up that same event, detail for detail as I described and remembered it. I go back to that house to check out the door. Across the door is the neighbor's basement door, since it was a duplex, and stairs leading up the metal basement doors that come out to the backyard. Not sure what the F that was, and I promise you I'm not that crazy. I get goosebumps thinking about the situation sometimes because it makes absolutely zero sense.
Noah, the alleged time traveler from 2030. Back in 2018, this guy had taken the world by storm. Although supposedly being from 2030, he's traveled all across the spectrum to the years 2060, 1999, and the year 2120, to which he also supposedly had video proof of what it would all look like. He explains that the clip he took was from Las Vegas and showcases flying cars to tall, futuristic looking buildings and a very peculiar looking orange sky. Noah explained, "The red clouds are global warming. You can see it's everywhere. I can remember it being incredibly hot. I'm pretty sure they are working on it in the future." He also stated that some really crazy predictions for the future, some key ones being Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter will become president, scientists live on Mars, Instagram becoming a thing of the past, cures for illnesses, and finally being able to talk to aliens. Noah also disclosed taking anti-aging pills that keep him the same age throughout his journeys, since he claims that time traveling makes you gain years. Of course, no one really believed any of this, especially with the video, to most people looking like a cheap 3D rendering. One commenter even pointed out that he's using a phone from our time to show this, rather than some crazy futuristic one. Despite all this though, he took a lie detector test that really put him on the radar, and he passed it with flying colors. What he was saying came out truthfully. But then again, this wasn't done by professionals or with professional equipment, so who's to say if it means it's actually true? The deja vu and parallel universe theory. I had speculated this theory for a few years now, and I'm really happy that other people are discussing it. Majority of us know what deja vu is. A moment in our lives where we get this strange feeling that we've done something like this before. It's French for already seen, and there are some scientific theories for why this happens, such as temporal overlap. This is when the long-term and short-term memories blur together for a moment. Or subconscious familiarity, where your new surroundings have some similarities to an old one. The last being neural delays that create a false feeling that some event has occurred. But I like parallel universes theory better. To explain my favorite version of the theory, a deja vu is when your other self in a different universe and you in this universe accidentally overlap the same timelines. The two of you are living very different experiences, but for some reason we have one, or a few if you're like me, moments in time where the two timelines collide at the exact perfect moment. Our lives perfectly linked up together based on whatever choices we made to get us in that exact same moment of time. I would also love to hear your theories about this down in the comments below. This is a great way to transition into the mirror image universe theory. It could also link to the deja vu theory, but this theory specifically focuses on the moments before the Big Bang, and scientists coming up with a hypothesis that there was a universe completely mirror image to our version today. However, the only difference is that time is moving backwards in that universe. I'm not going to try and get deep with it, but the basic understanding of this theory is that the Big Bang is the center point of time, and because scientists believe in heavy symmetry within the universe, when it happened, it also created a negative version of time of our universe alongside ours. So, when you think of cracking an egg, what would happen instead in the other universe is that it would start out from the yolk on the ground and turn back into the egg. This theory started back in 2015, when some scientists were up in Antarctica researching high-energy particles. What we did know before is that there are high-energy particles coming towards Earth, which from my understanding is because our universe is constantly expanding outward. However, they discovered high-energy particles going away from our Earth in the opposite direction, as if they were going back in time. There was something pulling or stretching these particles the opposite way, as if the universe is expanding in another direction simultaneously. Let's take a brain breather with some Mandela effects. This one, specifically from Toy Story, is new to me. Do you remember Woody's catchphrase being, "There's a snake in my boot"? Because that's how I remember it, and the majority of people who grew up with it. But we were wrong, because the actual phrase of it goes, "There's a snake in my boots." It was plural, and it was never singular. But of course, the internet didn't agree with this, with the biggest reason being that it grammatically doesn't make sense. The proper sentence should be, "There are snakes in my boots." And it also doesn't help with the fact that the Woody toys that came out all say, "There's a snake in my boot." There is no plural for those, so what gives? There was only one Reddit comment claiming that Pixar confirmed it's always been boot and not boots, but I haven't been able to find an article on that. How do you guys remember it? Tell me down in the comments below. Imagine finding a watch while you're exploring a tomb. Of course, watches have been around for quite a while at this point, but what makes the famous tiny Swiss watch so special? In 2008, archaeologists discovered a remarkable piece of metal that was the size of a ring, bearing the face of a watch that was marked specifically at 10:06. On the back was the word Swiss engraved. This was found in a tomb that had been sealed away for more than 400 years, and yet this watch was only 100 years old. How is that possible? Especially when Switzerland wasn't an established country at the time. The tomb was speculated to have been created during the Ming Dynasty that ruled from 1368 to 1644, and watches were apparently not a thing in that area at the time. My question, however, though, is how sure are we that it was sealed for that long? What are the odds that someone had gone in there prior to the archaeologist, but just decided on not taking or touching anything? It's possible, but then why did they leave the watch ring? People obviously speculate that there were maybe time travelers that left it as a clue for their existence, since many of those already exist across the internet. People love to believe we live in a simulation, with major ones being caught when watching sports. This specific video, uploaded by Highlight Heaven on YouTube, arranged a variety of clips from football that feed into this simulation theory, and there were a few that stuck out to me. The first two clips involve some very synchronized movement of football players getting up. Simultaneously, at the exact same time, their movements are mirrored perfectly, down to the hand placements, to the tempo, you name it. The biggest one that people have their eyes on is when one of the football players does this really weird, almost floating maneuver to get up. They barely use their hands as they hoist themselves from off the ground, as if all their power is coming from the balls of their feet. Sure, they have the momentum of pushing upward, but after that it looks like it's all in the foot power. But I do have a theory for these weird movements, to which I feel many of you have figured out by now. Football players are constantly practicing and drilling in certain movements, right? They've also probably been practicing the quickest and most efficient way of getting up when they get tackled, with one of these ways being the weird floating technique. I'm not a football player, but I've taken movement classes where we are drilled in certain ways of getting up properly and quickly. It's definitely a neat trick that these guys do here, and I can see how it would become an optical illusion at certain angles. The Man From Torid. I'm not sure how legit this story is, but still interesting nonetheless. On one sunny day somewhere in July in 1954, an ordinary-looking man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. There was nothing strange about the way he was dressed, sporting a nice suit and tie with a groomed beard. He was fairly familiar with Japanese, so no red flags thus far. It wasn't until officials noticed on his passport that he was coming from a country called Torid. There is no such thing as Torid, that we're all aware of, and when this man was confronted by police as a possible fraud or threat, he got extremely frustrated and tried to explain that it is in fact real and has been around for 1,000 years. So they got him to try and explain where on the map it was located, and apparently it was supposed to be between Spain and France, but he had no idea why it wasn't showing up on our maps, as he kept repeating he's made multiple trips to Japan before. He even had papers to support his case. However, before they could take a look at them, the man suddenly disappeared from his hotel room, one that was located on the 7th floor with no balcony. The police tried to keep him there while they figured things out, so they had no clue where he went. A lot of people use this theory to support the claims of parallel universes, but I don't know. It sounds a little too good of a story to be true.
Cameron Park in Waco, Texas is known for being one of the creepiest forests in the state. It's got this mix of eerie legends and paranormal activity that gives it a real dark fairy tale kind of vibe. There's remnants of an old abandoned castle here, for example, said to have once been home to a witch. The story goes that an old hag used to live there, practicing dark magic and luring youngsters in to poison them. When the locals found out, they formed a mob and burned her house to the ground. Now her vengeful spirit is said to haunt the ruins, chasing away anyone who dares to get too close. Some say you can even hear the screams of her victims echoing through the forest at night. Another infamous part of the park is referred to as Jacob's Ladder, a massive steep set of stairs that leads through the forest. It's a tough climb, but once you make it to the top, you get some amazing views. The stairs, though, are said to be haunted by a malevolent spirit, said to grab people's clothes and sometimes pull them down hard enough to tumble down the stairs to their death. It's a massive flat-top mountain sitting right where the borders of Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana meet. It's part of a region known as the Tepui, which is a collection of isolated flat-topped mountains that just don't look real, at least not like something you'd see here on Earth. Rorima itself is especially fascinating because it rises more than 9,000 feet above the surrounding jungle, and its sheer cliffs make it nearly impossible to climb from the sides. The top of the mountain is covered in mist most of the time, giving it this eerie, almost otherworldly look. As for what's on top, it's almost like an entirely different world. There are these unique species of plants and animals that don't exist anywhere else, and the area has a strange, almost magical feel to it. The isolated environment has led to all kinds of theories theories about it being a possible doorway to another universe. Some believe that the mountain could be some sort of portal, where the separation from the rest of the world creates a gateway to a parallel reality. Local indigenous tribes have their own legends about the mountain being a place where the gods live, and many have stories of strange events happening around it. Some explorers even report hearing strange noises while they're there. The Devil's Sea, or the Dragon's Triangle, is an area off the coast of Japan, south of Tokyo. It's often compared to the Bermuda Triangle, which is not a good thing. For decades, it's had a reputation for unexplained disappearances, strange weather patterns, and reports of unusual lights in the sky. One of the most famous stories here is the disappearance of the Japanese military vessel Kaio Maru No. 5 in the 50s. The ship, which was conducting research in the area, vanished without a trace, and no wreckage was ever found. There have been other reports of unexplained events too, including ships being found in the wrong locations, crew members mysteriously vanishing, and bizarre compass malfunctions. There's this idea that the Devil's Sea could be a place where time and space don't quite behave the way they should. The idea of a parallel universe or some sort of dimensional rift gets tossed around a lot when people discuss the area. Wycliffe Well is a tiny settlement in the Barkly region of the Northern Territory in Australia. It's about 380 miles north of Alice Springs, and it's known for one thing above all else: UFO sightings. The area only has a handful of permanent residents, but it's become pretty well known as a hotspot for strange activity. People from all over the world come here to visit the Wycliffe Well UFO Center, which displays local reports and stories of alien encounters. For decades, locals and visitors have reported seeing bright lights in the sky, strange flying objects, and mysterious unexplained events happening around the area. The town even calls itself the UFO capital of Australia, and there are signs along the road warning visitors of frequent UFO sightings. But why here? Why this tiny section of Australia? Some believe that there could be some sort of wormhole here, connecting the place to some distant part of space, or maybe even another dimension, with the UFOs acting as the vehicles that travel through them. Wycliffe Well is in the middle of nowhere, too, surrounded by vast desert. The isolation gives the place a certain eerie quality that makes it feel like a place where aliens could roam around undetected. Pyramid Lake in Nevada is a beautiful but eerie spot with a dark history. It's known for its dangerous reputation, and there are all sorts of legends tied to it. The most chilling of these comes from the local Paiute tribe, who speak of the water babies, angry spirits that pull people into the lake, and not for a swim, they kill them. The spirits are said to make these horrid crying and laughing sounds that echo off the lake in the late hours of the night. Over the years, many people have drowned in the lake, and because it's so deep, many of their bodies have never been found. But what's extra strange is the phenomenon of people disappearing in the lake only for their bodies to turn up miles away in Lake Tahoe, about 61 miles away. Hard not to wonder if there's something otherworldly going on in these waters. Eternal Flame Falls is a small waterfall in Chestnut Ridge Park in western New York. What makes this waterfall unique is that it has a natural gas leak at its base, which allows a small flame to burn right at the base of the waterfall. The flame is constant, has been burning for as long as people have known about it, making it a fascinating and somewhat surreal sight. The fact that fire and water are so close together, one being fueled by natural gas and the other rushing down a waterfall, it definitely gives it a mysterious, almost otherworldly vibe. There's a strong connection between the flame and the idea of portals to parallel universes, because the flame seems to defy natural law. The fire burning in such close proximity to water could be seen as this symbol of two opposing forces existing in the same place. Some people believe that the flame could be a sign of energy leaking from another dimension or reality, making it a potential gateway for forces from another world. But whatever your view is on all that, it is just really cool looking. The Crooked Forest has to be one of the strangest forests on planet Earth. It's famous for its trees, which grow at these odd, almost unnatural angles. Most of the trees in the forest are bent in a distinct J shape, and it's unclear exactly why they grow this way. The odd appearance of the forest has led some to wonder if there's something more going on here than just a weird quirk in nature. Some think that the crookedness of these trees could be the result of magnetic anomalies, or even something more bizarre, like a tear in the fabric of space. space-time. The forest is relatively small, but the strange shape of the trees gives it a haunting atmosphere. It's easy to see why people think the Crooked Forest could be a gateway to another world or dimension. Salar de Uyuni in southwestern Bolivia is the world's largest salt flat, covering more than 4,000 square miles. First glance, it looks just like this vast, barren wasteland, but it doesn't take long to realize something just feels off about it. It stretches out to the horizon, creating an optical illusion where the sky and ground almost merge together. And when the salt flat is covered with a thin layer of water, it becomes this big giant mirror, reflecting the sky so perfectly that it can feel like you're standing in the middle of the sky. At least that's what I've heard. I've never been there myself. Certainly looks like it from images though. It's surreal, and it's inspired some to speculate about its connection to parallel universes. The mirror effect especially is often described as looking like a doorway to another dimension. The flatness and emptiness of the place also gives it an almost timeless feel, as if time just doesn't exist in the same way it does in the rest of the world. Some people who have visited this site describe feeling a sense of being outside of normal reality, almost as if they were stepping into a place where the laws of physics don't apply. Mysterious region in Alaska, and it's got quite the reputation. People talk about strange things happening here, like UFO sightings and Bigfoot encounters, tons of Bigfoot encounters. But what really stands out is how many people go missing in the area. The rate of disappearances is nearly double the national average, which is pretty unsettling. Now, part of that is because it's a huge, wild, rugged place with some of the harshest weather on the planet. Even experienced explorers have to be super careful here. There are tons of reports of pilots, hikers, even whole groups disappearing without a trace. On top of that, there are stories of strange magnetic interferences in the area, compasses malfunctioning and making it nearly impossible to navigate. All of this makes the Alaskan Triangle a place full of mystery and danger. Are known for being pretty dangerous, but there's a lot of eerie legends tied to the place as well, probably why it's called the Superstition Mountains. The area is full of deep canyons, steep drop-offs, rough terrain. It makes it a tough place to navigate even for experienced hikers. Over the years, more hikers have gone missing in these mountains than in any other range in the United States, about 5 a year. But it's not just the wild terrain that makes the place dangerous. The Superstition Mountains are full of legends, all of them ending in tragedy pretty much. Supposedly, there's treasure hidden somewhere here by a man who's become known as the Lost Dutchman. People have been trying to find this treasure for centuries, and many have died doing so. Probably the most gruesome part are the reports of bodies being found without heads. Sometimes the heads are found, just not anywhere close to the rest of the body. One of the strangest phenomena caught on camera is the double sun effect. Basically, people have filmed what looks like two suns in the sky, and while this could be an optical illusion, some people think there could be something else going on. That what we're actually seeing is a glimpse into a parallel universe or an alternate reality. Jim Kaller, an astronomer at the University of Illinois, explains that the double sun is likely an optical refraction, but he calls it a, quote, pretty darn rare one, and admits that it's not fully explained by science, saying, "I doubt it's been computer modeled. There must have been some blob of atmosphere somewhere that caused this truly spectacular phenomenon, which in a sense is a mirage," end quote. Now, typically mirages happen when particles in the air bend light, but they're usually vertically aligned with the light source, not side by side like this double sun effect sometimes is. Kaller thinks that it could be a thick patch of atmosphere moving in front of the sun. There's even a historical reference to this in a book called Light and Color in the Outdoors by Flemish astronomer Marcel Meniert. He describes double sun phenomena in such detail that it almost matches the modern sightings. He wrote, "So many other instances have been reported that there is no longer any doubt about observations of sun and mock suns being at exactly the same altitude." But even with all this, experts still aren't sure what exactly causes this effect. Grant Perry, an atmospheric scientist, said, "This is not a common optical phenomenon that we're seeing here. It's definitely one of those effects that leaves you wondering, could we be seeing something more than just an optical illusion?" Imagine for a minute, if you will, that you've just died in a freak accident. Suddenly you open your eyes and an entity is standing over you, explaining that you're dead, but has given you the opportunity to travel back in time to a universe running parallel to your own in order to save yourself from dying. Of course, what I've just outlined here is complete fantasy, but many people have watched this video here and conjured up similar ideas and stories. In this CCTV footage, we see two men walking down the street at night. Two men who look pretty similar, mind you, both wearing dark clothing, both around the same height, same male pattern baldness. Now the man trailing behind catches up to the dude in front and taps him on the shoulder just as a car passes, and then out of nowhere, this metal object swings out just in time for the guy to jump out of the way. If he hadn't received that warning tap on the shoulder, the thing would have plowed right into him. Now, there's a lot to unpack with this video. First of all, and what most people point out immediately about this video, is the fact that the guy who gives the warning tap seems to know what's about to happen. He doesn't look back and react like, oh god, we're about to be hit, I better warn this guy. No, he doesn't even seem concerned with his own safety at all. He just is always looking forward, taps the guy, totally calm, almost as if he's experienced this before. He also doesn't stick around, doesn't look at the guy directly, just taps him and then moves on, almost like he doesn't want to be seen. But why wouldn't he want the other guy to see his face? Why the hurry to get away? Well, the fun theory, of course, that started to spread online is that the dude who gave the tap is a time traveler, possibly even a future version of the dude who nearly got hit. Now, is this the only explanation? Well, of course not, but it's a fun idea, and I think there's enough strangeness about this video that it's not easy to chalk up to mere coincidence. Even if there's nothing extraordinary about this video, it's pretty miraculous how this man was mere inches from death. The multiverse theory may actually have some observational science evidence behind it. Scientists at the European Space Agency Planck Orbital Observatory have been studying something called CMB, or cosmic microwave background radiation. This radiation is left over from the early super hot stages of our universe. Now, back in 2010, a team from the UK, Canada, and the US discovered 4 strange circular patterns in the CMB. It's not clear what these patterns mean, but one cool idea is that they could be the result of our universe bumping into another one. In 2015, another scientist at the European Space Agency, Rand Ramchari, made a similar discovery. He took a model of the CMB and removed everything we know, like stars, gas, and dust, and expected the image to be pretty much blank. But when he did that, it wasn't blank at all. Chari found areas of the sky that were 4,500 times brighter than they should have been. His theory, those light patches could be imprints from a collision between our universe and another one. Let's talk about one of the most talked about photographs of all time, at least when it comes to the strange and unexplained. In 1941, a photo was snapped at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia. At first glance, this looks like your typical historical photo. It's black and white. People are dressed in 40s clothes, old school cameras, all that stuff. But wait, there's one guy in the photo who immediately catches your eye. He's wearing more modern looking sunglasses, a printed t-shirt, and holding what looks like a camera that's too small for the time. People online have gone wild with the idea that this guy was a time traveler who slipped into the past wearing clothes from the future. A hipster from today somehow stuck in the middle of a 1940s photo. A pretty wild and far-fetched idea, and of course some people have tried to debunk this one, saying the sunglasses were actually a style from the 1920s. The printed t-shirt, well, on closer look, turns out it's just a sweater with a sports emblem on it. As for his camera, it was smaller than most, but portable cameras did exist back then. Boring, right? Well, sure, maybe all of that makes sense, but it doesn't stop people from wondering. Cause the guy does just stick out like a sore thumb, and at the end of the day, there's no way we can really know for sure. And that's not the only supposed time traveler captured on camera. There's also the story of Chaplains' time traveler. Take a look at this video here and see if you can spot anything odd, aside from the zebra statue. Yeah, see the woman walking in the background? Looks like she's holding something to her ear, right? Almost like a cell phone. Now, it's easy to look past this. I mean, cell phones are so common now that they almost seem like extensions of our bodies, but yeah, people didn't have cell phones back in the 1920s. case you didn't know. Back in October of 2010, a filmmaker named George Clark uploaded a clip to YouTube titled Chaplains Time Traveler. In the video, he's analyzing a bonus feature from the 1928 Charlie Chaplin movie The Circus. The clip shows footage from the movie's Los Angeles premiere, and if you look closely, there's that woman walking by holding what appears to be a strange device to her ear. Clark thought she was talking into a mobile phone, something that definitely wouldn't have existed in 1928. So it got people talking. Was this footage of a time traveler? Had this woman slipped into an alternate timeline from the future? Well, it's probably exactly what happened, but some people have some other, more out there ideas. Nicholas Jackson, for example, an associate editor at The Atlantic, pointed out that the woman could have just been using a portable hearing aid. This was a very new piece of technology at the time, so it wasn't common to see, but it is possible. But, I mean, isn't time travel, or the idea that this was a woman crossed over from another reality, more plausible to you than an old-timey hearing aid? Well, we're finally here. I've done videos on the channel before talking about the Mandela effect without ever directly discussing one of the most famous of all time, the Darth Vader Luke I am your father line. While considering James Earl Jones just recently passed away, and the title of the video being Parallel Universes Captured on Camera, I thought I'd give my 2 cents on this one. According to huge swaths of the population, the version of Star Wars we watch now is not the one we remember, and I'm not talking about all the George Lucas edits. This goes deeper, almost like the version we watched when we were young was from some alternate universe, or we've all slipped into an alternate universe ourselves. At least those of us that remember the line being Luke, I am your father, and not just no, I am your father. Considering this is one of the most famous movie moments in history, it really is strange how often people would get this wrong. Every Vader impression at recess began with Luke. Parodies would get the line wrong. One that sticks out to me is in Toy Story 2 with Zurg's line, no, Buzz, I am your father. So what's going on here? Are a bunch of us simply misremembering the line, or have we all really slipped into a galaxy far, far away? So this video was posted to Reddit by user Upstairs Cash 8400, and it's pretty bizarre. At first it just looks like an empty street with a bird in the sky until you realize that that bird's not moving. Then things get even stranger when we see a mother and son both looking up at the bird, completely confused about what they're seeing. So this is not just a glitch in the video. Now, sure, they could be part of a hoax, but if they are, they do a pretty good job of acting it out. What makes this so weird is that there's nothing behind the bird. It's just open air. It's not near a building. It's not like it could be a sculpture or something. It's just hovering. No strings, nothing. Definitely a bizarre one. And finally, we have the WOW signal. This mysterious radio signal was picked up in 1977 by an Ohio State University radio telescope, lasting just 72 seconds. It got its name from astronomer Jerry R. Amon, who wrote WOW next to the data printout. The signal's frequency and intensity were unlike anything we've seen from natural sources, leading some to speculate that it could have come from extraterrestrial life, but there's another theory that it might have come from a parallel universe. Something, whatever created this signal, could have dipped into a black hole and is now in a completely different universe. Of course, less exciting explanations like a passing comet or space debris haven't been ruled out either. While there's no definitive proof of anything, it's definitely worth checking out the recording. It's pretty spooky sounding. What you're looking at here is obviously police inspecting a crashed car, but this was no normal car. This is known as the Siri Ghost Car case. On December 11th of 2002, multiple calls came into the police about a car swerving off the road and crashing into a ditch near an exit ramp in Surrey, England. Police show up, expecting to find a fresh crash and maybe help a driver in trouble, but they find something stranger. At first, the officers don't see anything unusual. It's just another crash site, but as they get closer, they spot this old, overgrown vehicle. And they do find the driver, but he's no longer alive, and hadn't been for a long time. And I don't mean hours, I mean months. It was the body of a man named Christopher Brian Chandler. He'd been missing for months. Based on the state of the car and the body, the police quickly determined the crash had happened 5 months earlier, back in July of the same year. Christopher's family confirmed that he had been missing since then. So the question was, what were people actually seeing on that cold December night when they phoned the police? There were no other accidents to be found. Some people believed they were seeing a sort of ghost car, a glimpse into another reality. Could it have been a time slip where the crash from the past somehow overlapped with the present moment? Some people think the reports of a crash were from a parallel universe or timeline, and the car appeared in real time for just a brief moment before disappearing. No one really knows for sure, and we'll probably never get the full answer, but it's a perfect example of how strange the world can be, and that maybe there's more going on than we can ever hope to understand. Now, what you're looking at here is known as a cold spot, deep out in space. Back in 2004, astronomers detected an anomaly in the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. This cold spot is noticeably cooler than its surroundings, spanning approximately 1.8 billion light years. At first, scientists attributed this to a vast, empty supervoid, a massive region with fewer galaxies, but studying it further using more precise measurements, there's some doubt about that explanation, suggesting the void might not be as large or as empty as they thought. Well, so what does this mean though? Well, the discrepancy has led some researchers to wonder if the so-called cold spot could be the result of our universe colliding with another universe during the early stages of cosmic inflation. A collision like that could have left an imprint in the CMB, giving us possible evidence for the existence of parallel universes. This is the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or Anita for short. It's a NASA-funded experiment designed to detect high-energy cosmic neutrinos by capturing radio waves emitted when these particles interact with the Antarctic ice sheet. During its flights, Anita spotted several events where particles appeared to be traveling upward through the Earth instead of coming down from up in space. Scientists were very confused because that's not supposed to happen. Particles like neutrinos had never been seen passing through the Earth like that. Well, one hypothesis is that these anomalies could be explained by the existence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics, including the direction of time, are reversed. In this scenario, particles originating from a mirror universe could travel upward through our planet. In 2019, scientists dropped what looked like a blurry orange donut onto the internet and basically broke science Twitter for a week. What people were seeing was the first real photographic evidence of a black hole, snapped by the Event Horizon Telescope. Now, what we're looking at isn't the black hole itself technically, because physics just won't let us actually see the thing. What it is the glowing gas and light bending around the edges of the black hole. That ring is the Event Horizon, a one-way ticket to nowhere, or maybe somewhere else. See, theoretical physicists like Nikodem Pawlowski think that black holes might not just absorb stuff into nothingness, but may instead be gateways to other universes. This theory says when matter collapses into a black hole, it might not get crushed out of existence, but instead get funneled into an entirely new universe on the other side. Like, imagine every black hole being the Big Bang for a different reality. It's all based on some deep theoretical physics. No one can prove it yet, but it does fit in with the idea about multiverses and bouncing universes instead of just one big beginning. So yeah, maybe this blurry space donut isn't just a hole, maybe it's a door. What you're looking at here is a piece of what's called Curian photography. Back in the late 1930s, a guy named Simon Curian figured out that if you zap something with a high voltage current and take a picture of it, you get these weird glowing outlines around the object. Plants, apples, people's fingers, suddenly they all looked like they had some kind of electric aura around them. It was like photographing a life energy, or maybe something from some other reality bleeding into ours. Now, people still argue about what this actually shows. Some say it's just moisture or static or whatever. Cool, noted. But we're here to talk about the weird and unexplained. So others think this glow is something deeper, a glimpse into another layer of existence, something we can't see with our eyes, but might be there all the time, kind of like the Force. Some even claim these energy fields shift with your mood or health, and if you believe the more far-out theories, You're literally watching energy from another dimension react in real time. No one's ever managed to fully explain it, but the fact that a basic electrical rig might be snapping pics of alternate layers of reality, that's the kind of stuff that does keep you up at 3 a.m. scrolling deeper and deeper into the weirder parts of the internet. Back in 2007, a security camera at the courthouse in Santa Fe caught something weird early in the morning around 7 a.m. On the footage, there's this glowing white thing, kind of round, kind of shapeless too, just drifting across the frame. It wasn't fast or anything, just sort of floating there. People online immediately started calling it a ghost. Obviously, I mean, what else are people gonna say? Well, some said it looked more like something out of phase with reality, like we were seeing a bleed through from somewhere else entirely. The way it moves doesn't look like a reflection or a glitch. It looks like it's there, just not in the way anything else usually is. Of course, the official explanation was that it was a bug walking across the lens, and sure, it could be that, but what do you think? Does it really look like a bug? People in different parts of the world have filmed what looks like two suns in the sky at the same time. One bright sun and then a second one that looks slightly smaller but still glowing like a legit celestial body. Naturally, a lot of people are pretty confused about this. Some folks say it's just a lens flare. Others say that nope, that was actually in the sky. So scientists have looked into it, like Jim Kaler, an astronomer from the University of Illinois, who says it's probably some kind of atmospheric optical illusion, light bending in weird ways because of moisture or temperature layers in the air, but even he is not 100% sure what the hell's going on. Mirages usually stack vertically, like one image above the other. This double sun thing is side by side, which makes a little less sense, so no one knows exactly what causes it. Grant Perry, another scientist, flat out said this is not a common optical phenomenon. So yeah, maybe it's just a weird trick of the light, or maybe we're seeing something that we can't even begin to comprehend. So this one is pretty wild. There's a CCTV clip that's become pretty well known for how downright bizarre it is. A guy is walking down the street at night. A second man enters the frame in front of him, at which point the first guy does something super weird. The guy in the back taps the dude in the front on the shoulder right as a car whizzes by and a metal object swings out as the guy in front is about to get swatted with it. If it weren't for the tap, he would have been hit, no question. The guy who does the tapping seems completely unfazed though. He's not panicking, doesn't even look back to check if the car's about to hit him. How did he know what was about to happen? It's also strange because he doesn't even say anything. Doesn't stick around to be like, oh damn, wasn't that nuts? It's almost like he knew exactly what was going to happen and was just doing his part to stop it. And then he's out. Naturally, the internet lost its mind with theories. The most popular one, the guy giving the warning is a time traveler. Maybe he's from the future, maybe a version of the guy in front of him from a different reality, trying to make sure his past self doesn't die in a freak accident. Could this be a huge coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. So this is some straight up NPC behavior, except in real life. So a guy in Omsk, Russia wakes up one morning and can't find his flock of sheep. Usually he expects to find them right where he left them, but not today. He goes out looking for them and to his surprise finds the entire flock of sheep standing on top of a roof. Now there's no obvious way for these sheep to get up there, no secret sheep elevator that we know of anyway. The man assumed they'd somehow gotten spooked by something and just climbed up the roof. How the hell do a bunch of sheep get up there without making a noise or causing a ruckus? It's like they just teleported to the top, like an NPC glitch in a video game randomly appearing on a roof. Next we have space orcs. Orcs standing for odd radio circles. So what are these? Well, they're actually what the name suggests, massive circular blobs in space that show up in radio telescope images. And no one really knows what they are. They were first discovered in 2020 when astronomers were mapping the sky using Australia's ASCAP radio telescope. These huge rings appeared out of nowhere, perfectly circular, massive in size, and didn't match anything scientists had seen before. They aren't galaxies, stars, supernova remnants, or anything that usually pops up in space surveys. Some scientists think they might be the result of huge explosions or collisions far, far away, cosmic shockwaves that left behind radio footprints we're just now seeing. But others think they could have something to do with galaxies which have active black holes at their centers, And then there's the more exciting possibility that orcs might be a sign of something completely new, some sort of phenomenon we just don't have a name for yet. Point is, for as much as we think we know, the world is a highly mysterious place. So let's start things off with ghosts. You probably didn't think I'd be starting off like this, but I think you could make a pretty good argument for paranormal stuff like this being a sign of possible parallel universe. Almost all of us have heard someone's first-hand account of having seen something, or feeling cold spots, hearing noises that don't seem to have a logical explanation. The usual explanation, aside from the ones made by skeptics, is that these are signs of hauntings, usually a dead person who's not able to fully cross over to the other side, so they remain in this limbo between the world of the living and the dead, tied to the places they once called home. But what if these so-called ghosts aren't actually spirits or souls, but glimpses into another universe? What if what we interpret as paranormal activity could be caused by parallel universes overlapping? Imagine it like looking through a frosted window. You can see movement on the other side, shadows and shapes, but they're not really there in the way we understand it. Maybe at times in certain places, the line between dimensions gets a little fuzzy, and you catch a brief glance into a parallel world. Instead of a ghost haunting you, maybe it's just a glimpse of someone from a different version of reality. Next, we've got time slips. Ever had a moment where you're sure you were somewhere, but everyone else insists you weren't, or vice versa? Now, if this happens to you a lot, definitely see a doctor before chalking it up to what some idiot online like me says, but if you've been cleared of any early signs of dementia, then maybe something stranger could be going on. Some people think these experiences could be linked to parallel universes, the idea being that we can sometimes slip between timelines. One minute you could be at a party, the next you're back home, but with no memory of how you got there. Or you might be walking down a street and suddenly the surroundings look completely different, like you've been dropped into a past version of your city. This sounds pretty ridiculous, and I can't say that I've ever experienced anything like this, but some people say they have. You can find stories like this all over places like Reddit. Not that you should believe everything you read online, but even if a small handful of these stories happen to be true, that is pretty strange. Some people think time slips could happen when two timelines briefly overlap, and your consciousness gets caught in this switch. You're still you, but somehow you're seeing a different version of events, like a time traveler who doesn't even know that they're time traveling. Now let's talk about something a bit more sciencey, quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that when something happens to one, the other is instantly affected, no matter how far apart they are. Yes, this really does happen, despite the fact that what I just described doesn't seem to follow the rules of space and time. It's as if the particles are somehow aware of each other across these vast distances. We still don't know exactly why this happens, and if you wanted to make the argument, which I am, it could possibly point to, at the very least, a glitch in the Matrix, similar to the parallel universes theory. A glitch in the Matrix meaning that the world around us is an illusion created by who knows what. Point is, our universe may just be one of many. Could we exist in this complex web of overlapping universes where every now and then one of the strands twitches in a way we don't understand, causing a mysterious and unexplainable phenomena like this? Alright, let's talk deja vu. Sure, this gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's pretty disconcerting. Every time it happens, it throws me off. I'm always left with this uneasy, existential dread for about 30 seconds before I get on with my day, but it's this brief reminder that despite everything science tells us, and as clear as the world seems at face value, there are a lot of things we just don't understand. It's eerie, but kind of humbling. How can we be experiencing a sequence of events so specific that we logically know that it's the first time we've lived it, and yet somehow there's this feeling in the pit of our stomach that, no, we've been here before, seen this play out. It's not a memory, more like something you've seen in a dream, maybe? It's vivid yet hazy at the same time. There are tons of theories on deja vu. One being that you have lived the exact moment, but in a different life. That time either runs in a constant loop, or a parallel universe running right along our own briefly overlaps and gives us that strange, uncanny feeling. Think of it like your brain momentarily accessing memories from a different version of yourself, one who's living a slightly different life, but maybe in this other version you did something exactly like what you're doing right now, and for a split second your brain glitches and pulls that memory into the current moment. You're living in the present moment, but your mind receives a kind of signal from a different timeline. So I mentioned glitches in the Matrix a bit earlier, so I want to go into more detail on that. This one is very popular online. Glitches in the Matrix are when people claim to experience weird moments where reality seems to glitch out. Like say you notice what looks to be the same person walking by twice in a row, or objects appearing or disappearing out of nowhere, just weird stuff like that. Almost like a video game that's failing to render things correctly. The idea here is that we could be living in a simulation, and every so often, the code that runs the simulation gets a little wonky. But to take it a step further, what if those glitches aren't just errors in a simulation, but signs that our universe is brushing up against another one? In theory, if parallel universes do exist, we could occasionally get a peek into them or experience moments where the fabric of space-time bends. Could be as simple as noticing a repeating pattern in your day, but your brain can't quite reconcile with what you know of reality. It's like your system glitches out because it's trying to process something from another universe that doesn't quite match up with your version. The experience of missing time. This one is a classic, especially when it comes to UFOs. There are tons of stories and cases of people driving around a desolate road late at night when they see a strange light in the sky, and then all of a sudden, hours, or sometimes even days have passed that they just have no recollection of. Missing time. Could this phenomenon be connected to parallel universes? Well, the theory is that these abductees may have actually slipped into another timeline. As for whether aliens are involved or not, who knows? Point is, something could shift in the fabric of space-time and your consciousness jumps into a new version of reality, leaving this gap in your memories. It's not so much that time was stolen from you, it's more like you temporarily just moved into another timeline, and when you returned to your own, it felt like you lost those hours. Quantum tunneling is a very bizarre phenomenon where particles can move through barriers that should, according to physics, be impossible. Picture it like a ball traveling through a solid wall instead of bouncing off it. Yes, this does happen, but the science is very hard to explain. Again though, parallel universes, could they play into this? Could particles be tunneling from one reality to another? Instead of just interacting with the particles in our universe, these particles might slip through some sort of portal into another reality. This could help explain some of the bizarre stuff we see in our world that doesn't really make sense. Random moments where the laws of physics seem to just not apply. When it comes to parallel universes, the rules we know might not work the same way, and particles that can tunnel through different dimensions, well, that could be the key to how those universes are crossing paths, even if we don't always notice. Alright, let's switch gears, head up into space. We've got all kinds of mysterious things out there. Strange lights, unexplained radio signals, objects that don't behave how we expect them to. Of course, you know where I'm going with this one, but even some scientists wonder if some of these things could be evidence of parallel universes. Take the WOW signal, for example, an unexplained radio signal detected by astronomers back in 1977 that lasted for about 72 seconds and then disappeared. No one knows where it came from or what caused it. Some think it could have come from a parallel universe, trying to communicate with ours. And yes, it sounds pretty far-fetched, and maybe it is. Maybe there's a much more mundane explanation, but also consider just how vast and mysterious space is, and how little we really understand of it. Looking at it that way, the possibility of another universe interacting with ours in some way seems pretty plausible. Every so often we hear about things that seem to appear out of nowhere. Like maybe you're in your living room, you find a book on your coffee table that you're pretty sure you didn't buy, or maybe you swear you put your keys in one place but you find them sitting in a completely different spot and no one moved them. Or the reverse, objects just disappear without a trace. Can most situations like this be chalked up to our brains just sucking at remembering things sometimes? Sure, but could there also be something else going on in very rare cases? One theory is that this could be the result of objects slipping in and out of parallel universes. Say you leave your socks sitting on the edge of your bed, but when you turn around to grab them, they're nowhere to be found, so you look all over your room only to find that they're actually sitting on your bathroom counter. What if they were simply sucked into another version of reality for a while? Maybe it was in a parallel universe for a second, but when the reality shift happens, it comes back, just not in the same place you left them. Mandela effect. The phenomenon where a large group of people remember something in a certain way only to find out that it never actually happened that way at all. I think what's so interesting about this one is that unlike stuff like deja vu or objects going missing, situations that are a lot more likely to happen in isolation, Mandela effects are corroborated by mass amounts of people. For some context, the name Mandela effect comes from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. Some people think this is a glitch in our collective memory, like we've all tapped into a parallel universe where things happen just slightly differently. The list of famous Mandela effects is huge and just continues to grow, from the famous Bernstein Bears versus Bernstein Bears confusion to the misremembered lines from famous movies like Star Wars and Forrest Gump. It's almost like there is a version of reality that some people are still hanging on to, still remembering, even though it never actually existed in our timeline. Again, are these just examples of our collective memory not being the most reliable, or could we just possibly be momentarily connecting to another universe where things unfolded just slightly differently?